Welcome to my lecture, fellow college students, and today we are going to be answering the question on why evolution is important to anthropology. Now, the best way to answer this question is to go back to the beginning.
Alright, welcome again to my lecture, everyone. Now we are answering the question, why is evolution important to anthropology? Now, before we get started on Darwin and his theory of evolution, let's take a look at what was believed for centuries about the natural world before Darwin and a French man named Lamarck threatened the balance of what was accepted. So starting with the famous Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle, they began explaining the natural world as something that was fixed and unchanging. Plato himself expressed that all living things that share the same essence belong to the same natural kind. What he was trying to say here is that even though you see our black and white cows that we often see in our country, you go over to a different country and you see cows with a lot of hair. They both look very different, but they all belong to the same cow species, correct? Now, Plato's belief stretched into the idea that there were two worlds. One was perfect and one was imperfect, or what he called the ideal world and the material. Plato believed that underneath the variant forms, or different forms, that all living creatures expressed, there were the main essence of the creature, like what makes a cow a cow. This would later be called species. This essentialism explained that the essence of a creature shares with like creatures is how a cow becomes a cow and not a cat. For Aristotle, he arranged organisms into a line of the most primitive to the most advanced, a hierarchy of which creatures are the closest to the idea or visual idea of God. This was called the Great Chain of Being and became the basic framework to explain the natural world from the Middle Ages all the way until the 18th century. By the mid-18th century, however, the Enlightenment that spread throughout Europe began to question the widely accepted view of this chain. French scientist Georges Cuvier came to the conclusion while excavating in Paris that natural disasters were the reason some species disappeared and were replaced with new species. His view became known as catastrophism. From the contrast view of catastrophists came uniformitarianism, which said that nature's harmonious integration was evidence of God's handiwork. Catastrophism and uniformitarianism, it's a mouthful, positions quarreled about what was the truth, where catastrophists saw destruction and creating life from this. Uniformitarianism saw an unchanging harmony. But it wasn't until a French naturalist named Jean-Baptiste Desmoulins de Lamarck came on the scene and dealt the first serious blow to essentialism. Attempting to preserve the harmonious living of the natural world, Lamarck suggested that the similarities in existing creatures and the fossils of extinct creatures showed that over time the living species changed to better suit their changing environment. Lamarck believed that once a natural kind came into existence, it had the capacity to evolve over time into more complex forms. Lamarck believed that this was possible because all creatures had two attributes. The first attribute stated that organisms were able to change physically based on the demands of their environment, and the second attribute says the ability to activate this change when the occasion called for it is what caused the previous ability to be rendered obsolete. Now, what Lamarck was trying to say here, or was essentially saying, is that depending on the genes that we get passed down from mom and dad, is some of those aren't going to be applicable in our environment today, as in how we don't really need wisdom teeth, they are completely obsolete. Now, moving forward, this Lamarckian evolution, also known as transformational evolution, was backed by two laws of transformation. The first law stated an organ is strengthened by use and weakened by disuse, otherwise saying you use it or you lose it. And the second law of inheritance of acquired characteristics, which meant that the strongest traits pass on to the next generations, or as the one organism that survives long enough to procreate, their genes get passed on to the next generation. So just a recap of everything that was before Charles Darwin came on the scene. So There was a lot of beliefs and a lot of explanations as to why organisms were so different. Most of them wrapped around a higher power or purpose. It was the best way for them to explain things, and cultures and civilizations were incredibly spiritual before science became more solidified. Now, but they all wrapped around the same central theme, was that we knew that, for example, a cow was a cow, but there were different kinds of types of cows. They looked very different, but essentially they were a cow, much like how we as humans, we look very different, but we're all a part of the same species. Now we're going to move on to Charles Darwin. Now, Charles Darwin was a curious young man who ended up on the Galapagos Islands in September of 1835 when he was 22 years old while on the HMS Beagle. During his stay on the islands, Charles found something curious about the finches on the island. They differed from the Ecuadorian mainland finches. Mostly, he was looking at their beaks. Some were larger, some were smaller, and he attributed this to the food source. So these finches had different beaks because of the food source that was presented or most fruitful that they could get a hold of. Now, the Galapagos finches displayed different beaks or different characteristics from the Ecuadorian mainland finches. Now, this information that was gathered concluded, along with Alfred Wallace, who was a colleague of Darwin's, that species are susceptible to change if given enough time. The changes of the beaks on the finches, Darwin knew that it just didn't happen overnight. It was passed down through generations. Now, the one question that they had was how much time? Well, with the help of geologists such as Charles Lyell, they came to the conclusion that Earth was much, much older than the previously thought 6,000 years, which was mostly based on Christianity or the Bible, so on and so forth, when exactly Earth is 4.5 billion years old. And this new information of how old the Earth was gave credibility to Darwin's claim of descent with modification, which meant giving enough time, these genetics or features or phenotypes can be evolved. They can change according to the environment. Now, the two Darwinian revolutions that paved the way for important future scientific studies for the diversity of life on Earth was one, that similar species can be traced back to a common ancestor, and the second was natural selection. I'm sure we've all heard of natural selection. But just a recap of what it is, it's when genetic mutations of a species make it ample for that species to survive in their environment, and the species that survives, or the organism that survives from that species, go on to make more offspring, therefore passing on those genes for survival. Now, do you remember when we were talking about naturalist Lamarck? Well, here's where the second law that he states makes sense. Now, if you can't remember what the second law was, we're going to go up and we're just going to look over it one more time. Now, Lamarck's second law stated that the law of inheritance of acquired characteristics, which means that the strongest traits pass on to the next generation. Now, a prime example of Lamarck's second law is going to have to do with pandas. Who doesn't love pandas? Well, pandas have an elongated wrist bone, which serves them to rip the stalk apart of the bamboo, which is their main food source. Now, they did look at that, what if, once upon a time, pandas had a wrist bone similar to that of a bear? It's a lot shorter and is not suitable for ripping apart bamboo. But over a period of time, the panda's food source changed to where they only were able to eat bamboo. So the pandas who were able to strengthen their wrist bones to rip apart the stalk of the bamboo were more likely to pass that gene of elongation down through the generations, which is why all pandas now have elongated wrist bones, or what we call a panda thumb. Now, this is a prime example of Lamarck's second law, saying that over a period of time with the changing environments, it's going to alter the genes to better suit the environment to better suit the organism for the environment, which is exactly what he was saying, and pandas are a prime example of that. They're elongated wrist bones, or the panda thumb. Now, moving past Darwin and his theory of evolution and natural selection, we're going to go into explaining a little bit about biology. Now, I know it's not everyone's favorite subject, so I'm going to break it down as quickly as possible. Now, we all hopefully know that we get half our traits from mom and half from dad. These traits vary from sperm to ovum, however, which is why your brother or sister is not identical to you. Mostly what I'm saying here is that each sperm that your dad carries holds a very, very bunch of different traits. It's always a roll of the dice, and he's not going to give the exact same traits to every single offspring. It's a collection of traits that he has because you only get half of mom or dad's traits, not the full enchilada. Now, moving forward. Through these passed down traits or genes, mutations can occur during meiosis, which is when sperms and eggs are created. These mutations may pass harmful or good traits down to the offspring. Sometimes these mutations are to benefit the species for their environment, which is what natural selection says. But sometimes these mutations can be harmful and cause birth defects such as Down syndrome. Fortunately, a decent amount of harmful mutations are recessive, meaning they will not likely present themselves in that person, but you can be a carrier and you can pass it down to your children, especially if your partner has the same recessive or non-dominant genes. Now, moving past all that. Now, you're probably wondering, what does all this mean for anthropology? Well, I'm really glad you asked. We're getting there. According to Darwin's views, the survival of a species to pass down stronger traits was called fitness. Now, you're probably wondering, what does Billy at the local gym and his health nut habits have to do with this? Well, the kind of fitness Darwin referred to couldn't be found on the treadmill. What Darwin meant was a particular individual is more fit depending on how many offspring they have and pass down traits to. So Billy, who doesn't have any kids, is less fit than Pete, who has 6 children at home. Now that we know Pete has more fitness than Billy, we can say that Pete's genes will pass down to his children and display whatever characteristics him and his wife give their children. Now, it may feel like it's getting a little away from you, so we're gonna get to the point. Genes that are passed down to us from our parents can carry traits that weren't always there. For example, during our domestication of animals, after the Ice Age was over and our ancestors started to settle and become sedentary, we became fond of domesticating a famous docile creature known as cattle. Our likeness of drinking their milk helped bring to fruition a very important mutation that wasn't always there: the ability to digest the lactose in dairy, or cow's milk. Our ability to break down lactose entered our gene pool after the domestication of these animals. We're getting a little bit closer to anthropology, aren't we? And now around 35% of the world's population has the proper mutated gene to digest this delicious beverage, which the mutated gene is the ability for the body to create the enzyme lactase, which lactase is what breaks down lactose. Not everybody has this, and most of the world does not drink cow's milk because of it, and that's why you know probably a lot of people that are lactose intolerant. It's not very common to be able to digest dairy, no matter how much of it we consume in the United States. So, this is a prime example of what scientists John Audling Smee, Kevin Leyland, and Marcus Feldman called niche construction. Now, niche construction occurs when an organism, for example we humans, our environment which ultimately affects our biology, like drinking cow's milk and developing a mutation over a period of time to process lactose. Niche construction also displays itself in various ways in the animal kingdom as other creatures change their environments to better suit themselves. Being able to do this is why we are able to shift environments and still survive. Species' abilities to adapt is why we, as Homo sapiens, outbid the other 15 races of humans that existed around the same time as our ancestors did. We adapted and we survived. Now let's get to the point, shall we? Why is evolution important to anthropology? Well, without our understanding of the development of our species, it's difficult for us to see where we came from. From a humanoid organism that was just looking to survive to the complex, conscious, intelligent humans we are now, from beginning to end, it has all been the way we have evolved. From our biology to our cultures, our languages, and everything those great archaeologists dig up that our ancestors left behind. Evolution is important in all fields of anthropology. It explains how we became such a diverse people and how we are much more alike than some of us would like to think. As Darwin said, we all share a common ancestor, and from that common ancestor came our complex thinkers, the domestication of our species, technological advances, a plethora of diverse civilizations that held their own beliefs, practices, languages, and features. Evolution shows us how we're different and how we're similar, but most importantly, it gives us the framework we need as scientists and researchers to continue discovering. Now, I really appreciate whoever listened to this lecture, and I really enjoyed making it, and I hope you learned something. And you all have a great day.